This is Background Nippon. There is nothing here that needs your attention. What follows is Japanese history, told slowly. For the end of the day, the lanterns are lit. Before the boats leave, there is a moment of complete quiet. The armor diver sits on a flat rock at the water's edge. The sea is moving as it always is, a low swell, a slow rhythm that does not pause for anything. The sky is not yet bright. The other divers are nearby, adjusting equipment, tying their hair back. She breathes. This is not incidental. The breath before the dive is a specific thing, a practice of several thousand years. You slow the pulse, you fill the lungs, you bring yourself into readiness for a world that does not support human life, where you will spend the next 2 minutes, or 3, before surfacing again. The women who do this have been doing it in this place, on this coast, since before the oldest written records of Japan. Tonight, we spend time with them, with who they are, how they dive, and why they still do it. There is no rush. The tide is going out. Settle in. The evidence begins in silence under the ground. Shell middens, the accumulated refuse of prehistoric coastal peoples, have been found along the Japanese coastline in enormous numbers. The Jomon period, which lasted roughly from 14,000 BCE to 300 BCE, left behind middens that have been excavated at hundreds of sites. In the middens of coastal nThe prefecture and the Chiba Peninsula, researchers have found shells of abalone, the large, flat shellfish that requires either a tool or a diving person to retrieve because it lives on the undersides of rocks in water 10 to 20 meters deep. Abalone does not wash up on beaches. It does not come to the surface. Someone went down to get it. This is not proof of armor diving specifically, but it is proof of organized, repeated, deep-water shellfish harvesting, conducted by people who left no written record of themselves, but left their refuse in the ground for us to find. The middens are 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years old. The armor tradition is at least this old, and possibly older. The first unambiguous textual reference to women divers in Japan appears in the Nihon Shoki, the Chronicles of Japan, completed in 720 CE. This is one of the 2 foundational records of early Japanese history. It mentions, in the context of describing coastal provinces, women who dive for shellfish and seaweed. The description is brief and matter-of-fact, not exotic, not notable, just a description of what people in those places do. The lack of elaboration is itself significant. When the Nihon Shoki mentions something as unremarkable fact, it suggests that the practice was already so established, so ordinary to the people writing, that it required no explanation. By the 8th century then, the armor tradition was already old enough to be assumed. The Manyoshu, the oldest anthology of Japanese poetry, compiled in the 8th century, contains several poems about armor divers. The image of the diving woman, pulling herself through the water toward the shell on the rock below, had already become a poetic subject. It had already accumulated cultural weight. Something that appears in the oldest poetry of a civilization is not recent. The center of the armor world, for as long as records exist, has been the Shima Peninsula in Mie Prefecture. Shima juts south from the base of the Kii Peninsula into Ise Bay. The coastline is deeply indented, a long succession of inlets, bays, and small islands, each one with its own microclimate, its own patterns of current, its own beds of abalone and sea urchin, and edible seaweed. The sea here is neither warm nor cold. In summer it is pleasant enough to dive without a wetsuit, which is how the Ama have always dived. In historical times, in white cotton, to identify them in the water, and some scholars argue, to allow them to be seen by the sea creatures they were approaching. In winter, the temperature drops. The traditional diving season in winter was short. Ise is also the site of the grand shrine of Ise, the most sacred location in Shinto, rebuilt every 20 years, dedicated to the sun goddess Amaterasu. The shrine's offerings have always included seafood, abalone most specifically. For centuries, the Ama of the Shima coast were providers for the sacred. This connection between the sea women and the most sacred place in Japan has contributed, over time, to their cultural significance. Why women? The question has been asked for centuries, usually with a degree of puzzlement from people unfamiliar with the tradition. Diving is physically demanding. It requires strength and breath capacity and cold water tolerance. Why would this labor have been, in Japan's coastal communities, predominantly female? The answer is partly physiological and has been confirmed by modern research. Women, on average, have a higher percentage of body fat than men of comparable fitness. Subcutaneous fat, the layer beneath the skin, acts as insulation. In cold water, it allows a woman to maintain core body temperature for longer than a man of the same size. This matters. Extended exposure to cold water is dangerous. The limiting factor in traditional free diving is not only breath capacity but cold tolerance. A diver who becomes hypothermic surfaces before the shells are gathered. The Ama tradition selected, across many generations, for the people who could work in cold water for the longest time. Those people were, predominantly, women. This is not a story about men and women and cultural assignment. It is a story about the cold sea and the bodies that can endure it. The breath technique of the Ama is called isobue, the sound of the sea whistle. When an Ama diver surfaces after a dive, she exhales in a slow, controlled way, a long, wavering sound that is partly audible from a distance and carries across the surface of the water. Then she inhales, slowly, filling the lungs fully. This is not simply catching your breath. It is a specific respiratory technique developed over generations to maximize the efficiency of oxygen exchange. The long exhale before the full inhale helps the body rid itself of carbon dioxide, the gas that triggers the urge to breathe, more completely, giving the diver a longer window before that urge becomes acute on the next dive. The sound of isobue is considered by people who have heard it on the water to be one of the most distinctive sounds of the Shima coast. It is functional entirely. It is the sound of a body preparing itself for the next descent. But it has also become a kind of music, recognized across centuries as the sound of this particular work being done. The Ama gather three things primarily: abalone, sea urchin, and seaweed. Abalone, awabi, is the most prized. In Japanese cuisine, it is one of the most expensive seafoods, with a flavor that is both mineral and sweet, and a texture unlike any other shellfish. It is found on the undersides of rocks at depths of 8 to 20 meters. It clings to the rock with a muscular foot of considerable strength. Releasing it requires a specific flat tool, angled just right, thrust under the shell in the gap between the muscle and the rock. This requires the diver to be horizontal in the water, pushing against buoyancy, with both hands on the rock face, in the dim light at 15 meters, on a held breath. Sea urchin, uni, is gathered from the rock surface and requires a different tool. It is easier to find but more fragile. Seaweed, particularly hijiki and wakame, is cut from rocks in shallower water, sometimes while snorkeling at the surface. The sum of this work has fed coastal communities and supplied the finest restaurants of Japan for as long as Japan has existed. The traditional diving season runs from late spring to early autumn. In modern practice, with wetsuits, some divers extend the season. In the historical practice, white cotton suits, no thermal protection, the cold waters of winter and early spring were too dangerous for extended work. The summer season brings its own rhythms. The dives are limited. Traditionally, an ama would not dive more than a certain number of hours per day, and the exact hours were governed by custom and, in some periods, by law. The abalone population was understood to require rest. A bed worked too hard would not recover. This was not conservation in the modern sense. It was not based on ecological theory. It was based on long observation of what the sea would and would not tolerate. Over thousands of years, the ama communities had learned, empirically, how to take from the sea without exhausting it. The sea was not infinite, and they knew this. They treated it accordingly. In the 1880s, a young man from a noodle shop family on the Shima Peninsula became obsessed with a problem. Mikimoto Kokichi had grown up watching the ama divers return with their harvest. He had watched the occasional natural pearl, an oyster's response to an irritant, emerge from the shells. He believed that the process could be induced, that a pearl could be cultivated deliberately if you understood how the oyster made it. He spent several years and all his money on the attempt. He failed repeatedly. The oysters died. The beds collapsed. His wife, Ume, who was herself from an ama family and who understood the sea far better than he did, continued to work and to support the experiments. In 1893, he succeeded. He produced the first cultured blister pearl. It was not a perfect sphere that would take more years and more techniques, but it was proof. By 1905, Mikimoto was producing round cultured pearls commercially. By the 1920s, Mikimoto pearls had transformed the global pearl market, collapsing the price of wild pearls and making cultured ones the standard. The ama of the Shima coast were essential to all of this. It was their skill in the water that allowed the cultivation beds to be tended and harvested. Traditional ama diving costume is white. For most of the tradition's history, it was a simple garment, white cotton, covering the body but not the limbs, designed to be seen in the water. The color white is associated in Shinto with purity and with protection from malevolent spirits. The sea, in traditional Japanese belief, is also a realm of the supernatural, and the white costume offered a degree of spiritual as well as practical protection. The ama also wore specific amulets while diving. A symbol called the domen semen, a six-pointed star intersected by a grid, was sewn or painted onto garments and equipment. It was a magical symbol intended to ward off harm underwater. In the 20th century, rubber wetsuits became available and practical. Most contemporary ama dive in wetsuits, which allow longer seasons and deeper dives. But the white cotton costume has not disappeared. It is still worn for certain ceremonies, for festivals associated with the diving season, for the photographs that visitors to the Shima coast come to take. It has become a symbol as much as a garment. What it symbolizes is continuity, the unbroken line between the woman dressing now and the woman who dressed the same way 3,000 years ago. The ama appear in Japanese culture in ways that are both documentary and fantastical. In the documentary mode, they appear in legal records, in provincial census data, in detailed Edo period surveys of the coastal economy. They were taxed, their harvest was recorded, their communities were mapped. In the cultural mode, they appear in poetry, in woodblock prints, in no theatre, in folk tales. In this mode, they become something more than fisherwomen. They become figures of a particular kind of courage, entering the sea alone, without tools or companions, trusting the body's capacity to go where the air cannot follow. The most famous woodblock depictions of ama are by Kitagawa Utamaro. 18th century images that show the divers on the shore, in the water, at rest. They are among the most reproduced images in the ukiyo-e tradition. In the folktale tradition, the ama sometimes becomes supernatural, women who can breathe underwater, or women who descend to the sea god's palace and return with treasure. The real and the mythological have always been tangled together for people whose work takes them somewhere most humans cannot go. In the 1950s, there were approximately 17,000 active ama divers in Japan. Today there are fewer than 2,000, and the average age is over 60. This is the demographic story of most traditional occupations in Japan, but it is particularly acute for the ama. The work is physically demanding, the season is limited, the income is uncertain. Young people from the coastal communities have, for several decades, chosen other paths. The daughters and granddaughters of ama have become nurses, teachers, office workers in larger cities. This is not a tragedy in any simple sense. People should be able to choose their work. The decline of the tradition is the result of choices made freely. But something is being lost. Not just a skill. Skills can be recorded, documented, theoretically relearned. Something harder to transmit. The accumulated knowledge of a particular sea, in a particular season, at a particular depth. Which rocks in this bay have abalone under them in October. How the current on this headland behaves in the early morning. What the color of the water here means about what is underneath. This knowledge lives in the bodies of women in their 60s and 70s, and it has never been written down. The oldest active ama divers in Japan are in their 80s. There are a few. They are known by name in their communities. They are not regarded as unusual. They are regarded as the people who carried the tradition through the decades when it was unfashionable. An 80-year-old ama diving in the waters off the Shima Peninsula is doing something she has done for 60 years or more. The technique is completely embodied. She does not think about the breath sequence or the angle of descent or the way to read the bottom from the surface. She simply dives. There is a quality of attention that comes from doing something for 60 years that no amount of recent practice can replicate. The sea she is diving in is not a general sea. It is a specific sea that she has known since she was a young woman, that she knows the way you know the face of someone you have lived with for a long time. She surfaces with the isobu breath, the long exhaling sound crossing the water. She has been making this sound since she was a girl. In 2005, the Toba Sea Folk Museum in Mie Prefecture established a dedicated exhibition on the ama tradition. It is an unusually good museum, patient with the detail of the work, honest about the difficulty. It includes recording of the isobu, models of the tools, documentation of the rituals. It is a place where the tradition can be studied by people who will not themselves dive. There are also active efforts to recruit and train new divers. Some of these have succeeded. There is a small number of women in their 30s and 40s who have taken up the practice, some from diving families, some from outside the tradition entirely. The challenge of transmission is not simple. You can teach the breath and the tool. You cannot easily teach the knowledge of a specific sea that comes from a lifetime of diving in it. That part has to be accumulated, season by season, over time. The tradition will survive in some form. Whether it will survive as a living daily practice, women diving every morning in the summer sea as they have for 3,000 years, is not certain. The ama speak about their relationship with the sea in terms that are neither romantic nor fearful. It is work. It is difficult, cold, uncertain work that produces a specific outcome, shellfish, seaweed, income, and requires the careful management of a finite resource. The ama know better than anyone that the sea is not inexhaustible. They have practiced For thousands of years, the discipline of not taking more than the sea will replace. But there is something else in the way they describe it. The sea is a place they go every day. The undersea world, the rocks, the light filtered green through 10 meters of water, the weight of the water pressing on the body, the silence that is different from any silence above, is a world they know. They have spent more time there in aggregate than most people spend in any single specific place. This familiarity does not make it less extraordinary. It makes it more so. The extraordinary things that we encounter every day become, over time, more extraordinary, not less. There is a phrase in Japanese, fueki ryuko, that is associated with Matsuo Basho, the poet. It means the unchanging and the ever-changing, what is permanent and what is in flux, held together. The Amma are a good example of this. What is permanent? The breath technique, the white costume, the specific tools, the seasonal rhythms, the relationship to a particular sea that is the foundation of the knowledge. These have not changed in any fundamental way for as long as records exist. What is in flux? The number of divers, the age of the divers, the equipment they use in practice, the markets they sell to, the world they return to after the dive. The permanent things are carried inside the changing ones. The old techniques persist not in spite of the changing world, but through the bodies of particular women who have chosen to carry them. There is knowledge that resides only in the body. The way a rock feels under a hand in dark water at 15 meters, whether it is firm or loose, whether the organism you are seeking is underneath it, whether the approach is safe. This information is processed in a fraction of a second, below the threshold of conscious thought, because it has been processed in the same way thousands of times before. The way a swell feels from below when a larger wave is coming, a change in pressure, a change in the movement of the water, barely perceptible, that tells the diver to surface now. The way the light looks from the bottom of a breath-hold dive when the body is near its limit, a change in the quality of the light, a slight dimming at the edges, that is the signal to begin ascending. None of this is in any document. None of it can be fully transmitted by watching or by being told. It lives in the hands and the lungs and the skin of people who have dived in the same sea for decades. When those people are gone, that knowledge is gone. This is true of all deep practice. The Amma are simply one of the oldest examples. On a summer morning on the Shima coast, the light comes before the heat. The sea in the early hours is flat or nearly flat. The divers are on the water by 6 or 7. They move to the dive sites in small boats, not far usually from where they have always dived. The boats anchor. The women enter the water. From above, what you see is occasional movement on the surface, a head, an arm, the splash of an entry. Then nothing for 2 minutes, sometimes 3. Then the surface breaks and the breath comes, the long exhale, the wavering sound, and then the inhale. Then nothing again. This has been happening on this coast since before the oldest human writing in Japan. The boats are different. The wetsuits, where they are worn, are different. The world the divers return to, at the end of the day, is completely different from the world the women of 2,000 years ago returned to. The water is the same water. The abalone is the same species. The breath is the same breath. After the dive, the Amma rest. Traditionally, this happened in a small heated hut near the shore. Amma could not go directly from cold water to full activity without warming the body carefully. The huts were places of community as well as recovery, women resting together, eating, talking about the dive. In historical accounts, the huts were where the knowledge passed. The older women described where they had been diving and what they had found. The younger women listened. The knowledge of the sea, where the abalone were in this season, which rocks had been productive and which had not, was transmitted in these rest periods, informally, in conversation. This informal transmission was not less effective for being informal. It was in fact more effective. The knowledge was attached to specific experience, shared in the immediate aftermath of the experience, by people who trusted each other. What was transferred in those conversations was not just information. It was a way of understanding the sea, a relationship with a specific place, maintained through practice and expressed in words. This is, at its core, what any tradition is. Seg 02. Closing still / seashore 80s. The diver sits on the flat rock. The sea is moving. It has been moving here, in this way, since before anyone was alive to describe it. The swell comes from the open water to the south and breaks, gently, against this particular stretch of coast. She breathes. The long exhale, the full inhale, the moment of readiness, and then she enters the water, as she has done every morning of every summer for 40 years, as her mother did before her, as her grandmother did before that, as the women of this coast have done since the Jomon clay figures were still being made in the mountains above. The surface closes over her. The sea is quiet. The lanterns are lit. Sleep well.